Hello folks, Jonathan Milam here, and I've got several trumpets laid out. I'm just going to play them one at a time. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. We're going to start out with an Adams A6. For those of you that think it's a constellation, it certainly does look like one. Okay, what I'm going to do on each of these, just a C scale, and then I'm going to play Fly Me to the Moon, just a chorus of it real quickly, give an idea how these horns compare. Again, this is the A6 by Adams, very light bell. All right, Fly Me to the Moon. Okay, and I'm recording dry. There is no blender, as I said in a video a few weeks ago. No mixer. Just straight from the horn right to my little recording device. All right, next up is a beautiful Conn Vintage One sterling silver bell, gold plate. All right, and most of these, I think the Conn One gets a very bright timbre to the tone, perhaps because of the sterling bell. Wonderful horn. The Adams A6 is definitely a lighter horn. We've got here one that matches that. It's very similar. This is a Yamaha 8310Z. The Z horn, very light bell, great lead horn. However, with this beautiful big bell, I think it shares the bell with the LA. But beautiful big bell, you still get a very nice sound. All right, next is a horn very underrated, probably because they're underknown. Not a whole lot of them put out. I consider them somewhat of a boutique horn. This is the Cannonball Lynx. B&S, great large manufacturing brass instruments in Germany. have collaborated with Cannonball US and put out some marvelous horns. I think I've had about maybe six of the Cannonballs. Everyone has been a good player. To my way of thinking, this Lynx is extraordinary, but you can be the judge. All right, my last two horns are going to be darker. I started off with an Adams. Second to the last, I've got another Adams here. What I would consider a relatively heavy horn, 1 ounce lighter than the Conn Vintage One, but still such a solid sound. It resembles your Bach Stradivarius with your double braces here on the tuning slide into the lead pipe. Very, very solid horn. Seems to yield a darker tone, perhaps because it's got the 50 gauge bell, and I'm certainly not a power player to rattle that heavy a metal. Not the darkest horn we're playing today, but certainly along that line. The Adams A2. Great horn. And last is the horn that I've said recently is probably the funnest horn that I play. Just so enjoyable. Brent Peters put a Pudgy together. This is the American Belle. Lovely horn. Big Canstel bell, 5 1/4, I think. Dark rose. Everything else is brass, of course, with the nickel silver highlights. You've got your whole horn tuning here. And was just warming up a few minutes ago, believe it or not. And my daughter stuck her head in and said, "What are you playing?" She said, "That sounds so good." Way to be, Paige. I'll give you the 5 later, baby. But very nice horn, so fun to play. It's built like a cornet, but in close to the chest, your whole horn tuning right here, so easy. But lovely horn, probably a little bit darker than the Adams A2. Brent Peters, Pudgy, the American Belle. Well, there you got it, 6 great horns. Hope you've enjoyed this. Always a pleasure to see you. Take care of yourself. And in the holiday seasons, find someone else you can take care of as well. God bless. Have a great day.